So there's been news that once again railway fares are going to go up in the UK, across the UK. I just want to speak briefly about this. In fact, I'd intended to make this video a while back, but obviously it's been a very eventful few weeks in the news. Um, you know, Railway travel has always been important in this country. Obviously, railways were invented in the UK almost 200 years ago, 180 years ago, and it's a very common method of transportation in the UK. We're a developed country, but our railway system really constantly lets people down. Anyway, it got me thinking about a BBC report whereby they were talking about that well publicized incident a few weeks ago, where apparently there was a train that departed slightly early in Japan, somewhere near Tokyo, I believe, or it may have been Osaka. Can't remember exactly, but it departed slightly early, 20 seconds early, and the company actually apologized for that. Japan, of course, is a country that is famous for its efficiency. Now, I haven't been there, but that's certainly the impression I have. And the BBC asked the question, what is public transport, specifically railway transport, like in your country? And the overwhelming amount of responses were negative. So clearly, commuters and travelers feeling let down by their various networks is a truly worldwide issue. Clearly, some parts of the world are going to be more lax than others for a variety of reasons. Obviously, national GDPs vary greatly, hence, governments have different budgets in which they can spend on. Obviously, some countries are impacted by civil unrest, and there's a range of factors that can decide these things. Um, I remember a few of the comments. Someone from India said that they could go to a station and they would actually get a train that was scheduled from the day before, such as India's overwhelmingly such as the pressure on India's railway network. In fact, India, unless I'm mistaken, is the world's most extensive railway network. Certainly one of the world's biggest employers. Indian Railways is well known for that. I must admit, I think it would be a daunting experience traveling on Indian Railways. I've never been there, but I have got some impression of that. I've been to China. Now, China doesn't have that issue of people clinging to the side of trains, but Chinese railway stations can get very busy. I have been in various major stations in Changsha, Wuhan, and Shanghai, South, all very busy stations. But even smaller cities in China get very busy because there's just so many people. But UK stations can also get very busy because we are quite a densely populated country, especially the big London termini stations. So clearly, this is a major source of transport. Now, I contributed to that discussion, and I mentioned the experience I had in Dusseldorf in Germany 2 years ago. What actually happened was that a train had been cancelled. There'd been some issue with power lines, but basically was cancelled. There was an announcement in German and English, and that was that. No more information. Just we are sorry, it has been cancelled. I'd been on a day trip to Dusseldorf, just sightseeing around the city, and I had to get back to Rotterdam. My father was working there at the time, and I had to call him to tell him what was going on. Um, because we'd been intending to go somewhere the next day. Well, it was a complete mess. Basically, I went from kiosk to kiosk to kiosk. If you've ever been to Dusseldorf, it's quite a busy station. And it was appalling. And my impression had always been Germany was a bit like Japan. It was well known for high efficiency. Well, that soon tempered my previously positive perception of what German efficiency was supposed to be. It wasn't a language issue because the German commuters I could see they were getting frustrated as well, just being sent from one place to another. And it got me thinking that, well, anyway, to finish the story, I ended up there had been a bus replacement, but they didn't bother to say where you should get the bus. So by the time I was looking around to try and find it, the bus had already left. So I had to basically sleep rough in the station for 6 hours. This was in November, so it was pretty chilly. Um, and then I got the replacement train. The distance between Dusseldorf and Rotterdam is not very far, maybe 150 miles, thereabouts, 280 kilometers, something like that. It's not a massive distance. But anyway, I had to change trains 6 times that morning. 6 times. And it was probably the longest night of my life. Now, I've had other experiences. I had a problem in Paris about 10 years ago whereby I missed my train because the ticket machine in the metro station just wasn't working. By the time and then I just had no choice but to physically run to the terminus. I think it was Paris Gare du Nord. Can't remember exactly. I was going to Le Mans, and I ended up just having to stay all night in the station. So I've had more than my fair share of experience. In the UK, I went to the big Live 8 concert, 2005, huge pop concert to raise awareness for the Make Poverty History campaign. I missed my train then. Now, to be fair, that might have been my fault. I probably should have left a bit earlier, given myself more time. But suffice to say, I missed it, and I ended up basically sleeping rough on King's Cross Station concourse. So I've had more than my share of experiences, bad experiences. Having said that, I've also had a lot of trouble-free journeys, so I can't say it's always been bad. I've probably had more trouble-free journeys than troublesome journeys. One more experience I remember, I had something like 2 minutes to catch a train at Manchester Piccadilly Station. I'd been on a day trip to Liverpool. I was staying overnight in Manchester, and the gap that they gave me on the ticket was something like 2 minutes to get the connecting train to Newcastle. It was just ridiculously tight, and I was running like hell. I did actually catch the train, thank goodness, but goodness me, that really it was tight because it's a big station, and with big stations, sometimes the signposting is not great. Edinburgh Waverley is one of the worst. It sends you in all directions, because they have some renovations going on at the station, but they will send you up the flight of stairs, pointing at platform whatever, and then you find out it's a totally misleading sign. That's something that really gets on my wicket, really gets on my nerves. But anyway, something I want to point out is that it seems to be a universal problem is a lack of information. I think that travelers are not stupid. I think that people know that there will always be a human factor. Things do go wrong. You get situations like you could get vandals on the line, you could get flooding on the line, you could get a suicide on the line, and I think in those circumstances people should be as understanding as possible because that's someone's life, they've got a family and so on. So there is that human factor. People can understand things not working perfectly. But what railway companies the world over don't seem to understand, or at least they need to do a lot more about, is simply giving people information. People can accept disappointments, people can accept being let down. What they can't accept is being left in the dark. That's what really works people up. And this news that railway prices are going to go up again, that's going to infuriate a lot of people because commuters right now in this country, and I'm sure in other countries, feel totally powerless. You can write letters of complaints, you can petition MPs, you could do different things, but ultimately, I feel that commuters really do feel powerless because if companies raise prices, what can the commuter really do? They can get into civil disobedience and refuse to pay, but then they would have to go on hoping that other people take that initiative as well. Otherwise, they just end up getting fined. But I think there is an arrogance about railway companies that they have the upper hand. They can just keep putting up prices, and commuters can't really do anything about it. They can complain, but nothing will change. And I think that's what really infuriates people. I do feel sorry for low level staff, for example, who are at the ticket office or in the case of an airport, behind the counter because it's not their fault. They're just low level staff. It's the CEOs of these companies, the people at the top, who I feel really need to be doing a lot more to address That they need to basically get into the real world and maybe, for example, actually travel themselves on one of their trains to know what life is like for a commuter. Because I mean, I don't travel regularly myself, but I can see and understand the stress that people go through. Here in North East England, we have the Tyne and Wear Metro. It connects Sunderland, Newcastle upon Tyne, Gateshead, South Shields, basically the urban conurbation of Tyne and Wear. It's a particularly busy system. I think we are the second biggest transit system actually outside London, even bigger than the Glasgow network or Liverpool or any other transit system apart from the London Underground. But there is a widespread consensus that the service is just not fit for purpose. The rolling stock are now over 30 years old. There is constant failed trains. In my opinion, they don't even apologize that much when things go wrong. They'll say this is wrong, it's a failed train. But basically, again, you have a situation where they're putting up the prices, and what really irritates people is that it isn't a level playing field. If someone was to protest and not pay for their ticket, they would be brought to court. They would be fined. They would be absolutely, companies are very efficient when it comes to finding people. But when they let people down, they're very slow to offer compensation, or the compensation doesn't reflect the stress that someone has been through, especially at this time of the year. Now, I am going to Newcastle soon, hopefully to meet a friend that I haven't seen for 5 years, and I'm already nervous, anticipating that there'll be problems on the metro because it's just so often the case. I'm not suggesting every single journey has a problem. But what I find is they have quite an arrogant attitude. If a train is late and people get late for work and then they end up, losing their job, Metro doesn't really care. And yet, if someone dodges a ticket, which people shouldn't do that, but they're very quick to offer fines, to throw out fines, I should say. But to get back to my point about basic communication, where there is a problem, all people want is some basic communication. Again, a problem with the metro is they will offer bus replacements if a train is cancelled, but they won't give you any information about where to get the bus. And then bus drivers don't know if tickets are valid or not. There's no communication between the bus companies and the railway companies, which to me is just ridiculous. So I really think, generally speaking, railway companies, I can't speak at great detail about other countries, but I would imagine it's a similar situation. This really does seem to be a universal problem. But sticking to the UK, companies in general really need to get their act together because they're causing misery, especially at this time of year at Christmas time. People are trying to get home to their families. Trains are busy, and we're by no means, like I say, in China during Spring Festival. My goodness, I've had friends who've had to stand for 16 hours because of the ticket situation. Now that isn't necessarily an issue of incompetence. It's just because the competition there is so big that if you don't get your ticket until the last minute, that's what you're left with, which isn't really the fault of the companies. But goodness knows, traveling can be very, very stressful. I feel companies can do a lot more to make it stress free. They're very good at advertising themselves, they're very good at issuing fines. They're not very good at offering compensation when they let people down. And I see no justification for hiking prices. They will always say the money is to improve services. But the problem is, for example, in the case of the Tyne and Wear Metro, the problem is people don't see those services improving. And if by improving services they mean, putting some paint at a station, I really think in the case of the Tyne and Wear Metro, for anyone who lives in this region, I really think our biggest priority isn't about doing up stations. It's about an efficient service. I honestly think most people in Tyne and Wear, and there's people use it far more than I do. I don't regularly commute, thank goodness, because I've seen the stories of people who do, and it must drive them crazy. They're constantly being made late for work, and it's something that I really think companies need to get their act together. And the problem is these big CEOs. I really don't know what they're doing to improve this situation. Whatever they are doing, they're not really taking on board the concerns that commuters have. What they should do is have a price freeze, sort the system out, improve the situation so that people feel they're getting value for money instead of constantly hiking up prices. Because all that does is add insult to injury. People are thinking you're hiking up prices, but we're not seeing the benefits here. Now, I'm not saying that every single journey is negative. I'm not saying that you cannot, for example, find good deals. I remember I used to commute between Wolverhampton and West London, and that was pretty cheap by UK standards. I think I got the ticket for £20. And I used to always take advantage of that. So I'm not saying that you cannot get good deals. You can. But there are too many examples of people feeling let down. And I think there are simple things that can be done that can improve this. People don't expect the system to be perfect. But at the very least, when a problem occurs, when a train is cancelled for whatever reason, people just want to know information. They want to know what should they do? Where should they go? At what time will the replacement be there? These sort of things. What people cannot stand is being left in the dark and being left to stand there like cattle. I think that is what infuriates people. And it really impacts millions of people. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know in your country what the situation is like. And for my fellow Britons, I'd like to know where you live and what the situation is like where you live. Although we're an island nation, maritime transport is not as common because, for example, if you're traveling from, say, Leicester to Sheffield, obviously you're not going to take a boat. So I find that ferry travel is. My parents often use the P&O ferry between Scotland and Northern Ireland, and as I understand it, that's a lot cheaper than both railway and airfares. Now, airplanes and air aviation also attracts a lot of controversy, but I haven't mentioned that as much simply because I don't think it's as widely used. Regular commuters are more likely to use train or bus than planes. Let me know your thoughts. I really think, generally speaking, companies need to get their act together and understand there are certain things that need to improve. Basic communication. Thanks for watching.